Are we too critical of the church? The answer is yes. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm the serial intellectual. I create intellectual products that transform people and change the world. The reason why we're too critical of the church is because our expectations are way too high. Did he just say what I thought he said? I said what I said. Our expectations are way too high. Now I'm going to prove it to you. Let me ask you a question. What is the church? Is it the buildings? Is it the denominational structure? Is it the religious history? No. What is the church? It's the people. What do you know about people? If you put a group of people in an entity, in an organization, in an institution, what do you know about that? What is likely to happen? Well, imperfections are going to happen. You say, oh, you're excusing the church. I'm not excusing. I'm explaining. Have you ever heard of the United States referred to as a more perfect union? Was it not some of our civil rights forefathers who argued based on what was supposed to be versus what was? In other words, the Declaration of Independence declared that we're all created equal, but that wasn't the real life experience, and that we have been endowed by a creator with certain inalienable rights, but that wasn't being experienced. And so the issue was, on the one hand, we have what is supposed to be. On the other hand, we have what is, and there's a chasm. If it's true for the United States of America, it's true for the church. You see, the church is supposed to be something, but it's not. And oftentimes it's not. Often the very things you experience outside of the church, you experience inside of the church. Now, my conservative Christian friends are going to say, that's because they're not real churches. What? Have you read the Bible? Have you read 1st and 2nd Corinthians and Galatians and Romans and Ephesians and Philippians and 1st and 2nd Thessalonians and James and the Peters? Have you read the first 3 chapters of Revelation? Have you read the majority of the prophets? The whole biblical narrative is full of criticism of God's people, Old Testament and New. Give me a break. Jesus went hard on God's people, hard on the institutions that were going astray. In other words, we're late to the criticism game in the first place because the Bible doesn't give God's people or the church or the Old Testament Jewish temple or synagogue passes on anything. That's the irony of all this, that we think we're up on the game. Listen to me. We're too hard on the church because our expectations are too high. Well, we need to hold them accountable. We do. And when someone in the church uses the church to molest children, they should be put to death. When someone uses the church or their positions to molest someone or to rape someone or to cover up and uses the systems of the church to do that, the people who are directly guilty of that, they should be brought to full justice. And hey, I've got a little Bane in me, a little Thanos, so I once told the church I pastored that if I ever found out that stuff was happening, I might burn the building down, just so that we wouldn't have a refuge for wickedness. So I'm not soft on crime, and I'm not trying to excuse the church. I'm trying to reason with you. We have an overly critical spirit of the church because we don't understand what the church is. We believe that once a person has a relationship with God, that now that relationship suddenly, poof, they're no longer going to be susceptible to evil. That's not true. It's definitely not true in the Bible. In fact, you know what? There's some people who are really honest. They read the Bible and their conclusion is, why should I listen to the Bible and follow the Bible? The very people who are in the Bible, save a few, very few, Jesus and maybe a few others, the majority of them are messed up. Like a lot of them are messed up. Some of them did great things, but a lot of them were messed up. That's a more honest reading of Scripture. Does it mean that we get a pass to do evil? No. Does it mean we're excused to do evil? No. Does it mean that religious institutions are get off the hook? No. What it means is for some reason, we have developed these overly high, unreasonable, stupid expectations of the church. You say, well, that's what people in the church are telling us. So do you just like believe everything they tell you? I mean, there was a group of people 2,000 years ago that went to another group of people and started telling them about this book, the Bible. And you know what they did? They opened it up for themselves to see whether it was actually true. They were called Bereans. So just because there's a bunch of pastors or priests or people, religious figures running around telling you what the church or the temple or whatever it should be, doesn't mean that's what it is. And it doesn't mean they're getting it right. But you know something? I think there's a little bit more of a mischievous motive to this criticism, this being overly critical. I think we're overly critical because it's popular. It's kind of cool to be critical of the church today. You get rewarded. You get on stages. You get a pat on the back. Oh, you're not drinking the Kool-Aid. Yeah, you really see those faults. That's why I don't go to blah, 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 blah. You know, 100 years ago, you couldn't find a lot of people criticizing the church. 200 years ago, you couldn't find, because we know what a lot of the church, not all, a lot of the church was involved in outright wickedness. And it was, there's been seasons in human history where nobody said nothing. Because if you said something, something would happen to you. So I think a lot of us are critical of the church because it's popular. It's the in thing. And I think sometimes we feel peer pressure to do it. And I think some of us who go to church and who are involved with the church, we want the pass by saying, oh yeah, the church is jacked up, I know, and we're trying. So that people go, oh, okay, well, as long as you know that, you can go to church. I'm just making sure you're not in a cult. So the job you go to is perfect. The people you work with is perfect. The organizations you work for are perfect, but they're not claiming to be. Read their values, read their beliefs, read their mission statements. They are all hypocritical in some way or fashion. Listen, here's the point. We're too critical of the church. The church is what it is. It was never designed to be a perfect organization. It will be held accountable for all of its imperfections. It will be. Criticizing the church is not really a solution to the problems in the church. It's just stating the obvious. Because if you're part of an organization that has all these moral platitudes and puts all this stuff, plasters it everywhere, it's easy to hold them accountable. They have 10 commandments, they have mission statements, they have love one another, they have statements like do not judge. So they put out 30, 40, 50 lines and precepts. And we go, you're violating this, you're doing that wrong, your church should be, the church should be, the church should be, the church should be. It's easy to judge a church because the church puts all of its stuff out there what it should be. It's like it hangs itself. So what credit is that to you that you're able to be critical of the church? Seriously. Duh. God's been doing this for thousands of years. He's been talking about his people and calling them to account. You're late to the game. So what does this all mean? Well, maybe you should think about what it would look like for you to have reasonable expectations of the church, which does not mean you excuse the church's behavior or the people in the church's behavior, but that you realize they are people like me, and they are imperfect like me. Something to think about. Grace and peace.